Talent development leader. For years, you have trusted ATD to develop your team. Now ATD is elevating its content, communities, and capabilities to develop you. Talent development leader is ATD's brand for your professional development, providing content that fosters and promotes your thought leadership, community that progresses with your career, and capabilities backed by ATD's capability model that keep you on the leading edge of the field. Welcome to ATD's Talent Development Leader podcast, featuring monthly conversations with the greatest influencers in the talent development field. We cover the latest trends, hot topics, and future-focused ideas that current and aspiring TD leaders need to know. Learn more by visiting www.td.org and searching for Talent Development Leader podcast.
Today, I'm joined by Amii Barnard-Bahn. Amii has been recognized by Forbes as one of the top coaches for legal and compliance executives. A former Fortune 5 executive and CHRO, Amii is a consultant and coach to the C-suite and leaders at global companies like Bank of the West, Adobe, AbbVie, and The Gap. Amii is a contributor to Harvard Business Review and a member of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches. A lifelong diversity advocate, Amii testified for the successful passage of the first U.S. laws requiring corporate boards to include women. Amii earned her law degree from Georgetown University Law Center and her BA from Tufts. Hi, Amii. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Anne. Thanks so much for having me.
So today we're talking about career development and promotability, and not necessarily for your employees or the people in your organizations, although we will talk about that, but mostly for yourselves. This is about your career advancement, talent development leader, listener. Amii, in your 20 plus years of experience working with and serving as a C-suite exec in global Fortune 5 companies and now partnering with corporate leaders, teams, and boards globally, what are the biggest ahas that you've had about career advancement? What do you think are the 2 or 3 most important things to know if you're someone who is seeking a promotion or a new career opportunity?
Those are great questions. And, I would say that with regard to the ahas, at a certain point in your career, relationships matter more than experience and credentials. Because when we're advancing in our career at about the senior manager or director level, we tend to hit a saturation point on experience, where our experience is good enough. But then to get promoted and advance from there, it's about how well we get along with and manage people, all kinds of people. I find that people tend to over-index on their credentials and they can get stuck at middle management. So if I could give one piece of advice to my younger self, it would be to get good at giving and receiving honest feedback. Because when you have knowledge of how others perceive you, this is gold. You're empowered with the knowledge to then respond and have the ability to change perceptions. And I find that having blind spots holds people back more than anything.
That's excellent feedback. I know in my experience, kind of thinking about my own career and over the years, how I've tended to be in the driver's seat. I think giving and receiving feedback is certainly something I can work on. I've also learned that taking charge of my career is necessary to kind of experience the movement I want. And curious if that's a typical experience for folks, or if I hate to use the word should. I'm going to wipe that out of my own vocabulary. But
right.
Should the organization be taking an active role? Should the employee, or kind of what's the balance there?
Well, I'd say that it's great that you have that approach. I think that's a very wise approach, and certainly in terms of the employer-employee contract and the expectations that we should or can have realistically, I think that's certainly changed over the past 50 years. I believe as leaders, we owe our organizations our best thinking, effort, and commitment as long as we are there. And in terms of our own careers, we definitely need to be concurrently taking ownership of our future path. It's ultimately, while we would love it, it's ultimately not the company's job to look out for us. And what I would say throughout my career, both as a CHRO and just as an executive working, the tough truth is that a company will look after you if it's in their best interests, if there's a mutual fit. And if there is, and there continues to be, then you're fortunate and that's fantastic. And you might just keep climbing all the way to the C-suite if that's what you want. But that can be a minority of situations. Most of us, myself included, need to take the lead and keep learning, growing, exploring along the way, and know when it's time to hang back or push or to leave. And this gets easier with experience, and it requires more self-awareness and external awareness, keeping our skills sharp and our network active to get the most satisfaction out of our working life, which is getting longer. And so it's important to stay, I'd say, stay aware and keep in touch with that.
So feedback, relationships, certainly ownership. What else? What are some other best practices that you've experienced in your own career, your experience as a coach? Other insights you would share with folks who are really looking to be promoted soon?
Yeah, I would say that one fundamental thing that I always go back to is that leaders succeed or fail based on two things. The first is how well they know themselves, and the second is how well they get along with others. And so getting good at those two things are really the crux of it. And, taking the first, self-awareness, knowing what your values are is really key. I see that in my coaching with executive leaders, is that usually when someone is unhappy, it's because there's a lack of alignment with their core values and what the organization is asking them to do, or what their focus is. And so sometimes you can reframe your situation to become more aligned with your values. And I've done that, and that's been super helpful to people in terms of moving forward. But sometimes, in a minority of cases, but sometimes it's not. And I've certainly left roles where it wasn't a fit, where I felt like I wasn't growing anymore. I'd plateaued and I just didn't see that next change curve coming up. I'm definitely someone who needs to keep growing and learning. And I'd say every 6 years, if there wasn't something within the company, and there was oftentimes, I had a wonderful run at one company where I had 3 different roles and it felt like a different company and it was new and exciting and I had new responsibilities in each one. But I think staying aware of that. And then of course, as a working mom, there's also, family considerations that can come into play. And so sometimes you might be willing to compromise in one area. You might be a little more bored, but gosh, it may come at a perfect time where, you have young kids and you've got as much as you can handle. Thank you very much. And so, it just depends. And so it's wonderful if those align, but sometimes they don't. And so of course I have colleagues where they've needed to shift a little bit or take a little bit of a step back or a step down and then pop back up again when things normalize or when the kids go to school or whatever it is. And we've seen a lot of that, of course, the last few years with health issues, with aging parents, disabilities we might be handling in our family. There's so many reasons to need to take your foot off the gas, even if your mind wants you to. I think those are the other hard things personally is when you really want to be all in. That can cause a lot of stress, but you just can't be. And so people need to be kind to themselves.
That's great. I appreciate that perspective on self-awareness, flexibility, grace for yourself. And I think that's huge in career development. I know we talk about advancement, right? Promotability, but I think development as a whole is a bigger picture.
Yes.
Yeah. So I did take I wanted to shift gears a little bit here.
Sure.
I did take your Promotability Index. So for all listeners here, this is a free self-assessment that Amii created for individuals to take and measure their strengths and opportunities for growth in 5 key elements of promotability. So Amii, I'd love to hear. It's eye-opening for me. I really learned ways that I can grow, areas I can work on when I'm thinking about moving up in my career and becoming more promotable. I'd love to hear from you a few questions about this index. First of all, why did you create it? And what exactly can it do for folks seeking a promotion?
Yeah, thank you. It was exciting. I mean, as we were talking, you were sharing some of the reasons why I created it, which is really, if I'm a person who wants to grow and continue to learn, what do I need to do? And how do I take charge of that? And so I feel that not everyone is lucky to have, a talent development lead in their organization. There are a lot of people out there who have no access, or maybe their boss just isn't focused on that and they don't have the support or the sponsorship. So the Promotability Index is designed to be a resource at any time in your career, at any point in your life, very flexible. It relies on what you mentioned earlier, which is you being in the driver's seat and you primarily being the person in charge of your own growth, hopefully with support and partnership of your boss and the colleagues around you. But if you don't have that, then you can keep moving forward. If you do have that, it's a super tool. So I think that one of the healthiest things you can do for your career is really focus on what you can control. And having an exceptional career really does require advanced planning and investment. So this Promotability Index assessment is 82 questions. It forms a self-assessment that anybody can easily take. It's online. It's also mobile friendly. Only takes, 10 or 15 minutes. And it enables anyone in any industry, anywhere along their path, to use the assessment. And then I made a companion guidebook to discover how your skills stack up against the 5 elements of promotability and helps people be more effective leaders. And the elements I really reverse engineered from all my time in corporate and hiring, firing, growth industries, staffing up, going through rifts, layoffs, all the things. These are the 5 things that decision makers use to evaluate performance, who to promote and who to invest in. And it's a flexible tool. It's been used for individuals seeking promotion. Leaders have used it with their teams to create a shared language around promotions and around how to give good quality, actionable feedback as opposed to subjective measures that I can't stand and like to get away from. So my goal was also to level the playing field. There are a lot of sloppy words, shall we say, to put it nicely, that are used sometimes. Like, I don't know if you've ever gotten feedback. One of my favorites is, "Oh, you're doing great. You're just not ready yet." Or just keep doing what you're doing. What? Like, what am I supposed to do? Yeah. I think that's a compliment, but what do I do? So, right, that's not helpful. So we need to tell people, hey, you need to work on your presentation skills. They need to be stronger. Your communication skills don't convey strength, don't convey executive presence. There's so many things. Or you have a blind spot. You're actually, a little aggressive in meetings, and people, it's intimidating to some of your peers. And we need to see that you can work with your peers. Your peers, people underestimate peer relationships. I'll go off on that for a second. Peers are the biggest, the most judgmental group of the 3 groups that you have to work with to get ahead in terms of your boss, your peers, or your direct reports, or people who may have less authority than you in the organizational pyramid. And they're the toughest judges because you're usually competing with them for roles and jobs. And it can be an awkward relationship. I've written about this in a few Harvard Business Review articles to try to help people navigate what can be a very complex relationship. But the bottom line is, if you stay in an organization long enough, your peers either become your boss or they become your direct reports. So it's really important to keep that in mind, to play nice and to figure out how to navigate those with grace. It's a tall order and it can be done. I'm sure you've seen people do it well. I'm sure you've seen people do it badly. And so those are really important. And so I like it when leaders adopt this. I have a case study on my website where an entire organization adopted the Promotability Index for their whole division. And that was exciting because everybody had a career conversation. Everybody had a shared language and something very specific that was not personal, that was not subjective, around what they needed to do better. And then they had a powerful conversation with their boss. What they did is they took the assessment and walked it into their boss and said, hey, this is my assessment, how I think I show up. Can you give me feedback? Take it. Let's meet, in a day or two. And I'd love your feedback on, how do you align with this? Do we see my performance and my behavior through the same lens? Super powerful conversation. I mean, I doubt anyone's ever had a conversation as powerful as that, frankly. I wish I'd had them with my boss. And then some people got wonderful feedback saying, actually, you're really good at X. You're really good at Y. And the person never knew that because it never came up. It wasn't put in front of them, in a list of 82 attributes and skills. And they might say, I do think you need to work on this a little more. And here's how I can help you. It plants the idea, right, in your colleague's mind. And then other colleagues have formed mentoring groups. ERGs have created working groups around the 5 elements and shared, hey, I'm working on executive presence. Who else is working on executive presence? Let's get together and peer mentor each other on this. Those are fabulous too. Associations have used it in that way so that it's not inside the company, so that people can feel safe. I mean, actually, ATD could do that. It's pretty neat. So I've loved seeing how people use it. I've intentionally tried to keep it creative. I think that one of the worst things that I saw when I was in corporate that I never got a complete solution for, so I'd love to hear from your members as well, is how do we keep performance in the look back? It's often a look back. It's what did you do last year? How much money am I going to give you out of my 3% budget? And do you get a bonus and that kind of thing? That's great. And of course we have to do it, but how can we keep it creative and fun? Well, that's the moving forward. How can we get people excited again and inspired and sparky and, owning their growth? And to me, that's the face forward conversation, right? That's looking forward. And so something like this, my hope is to get them out of the nits of the pay and the title and just around, what really lights your fire? What's exciting for you? What would be cool for you to learn this year? And how can I help you? And I think that co-creating that is critical. Of course, you need to pick things that are ideally aligned with your role and aligned with what the company needs. But it'd be great if you have a Venn diagram to co-create that and find the stuff in the middle that you want to do and the company wants you to do and that's valuable for both of you so that you take this and own this. And so that's the goal here as well.
That's excellent. And for our listeners, this promotability index, it's really for you. Obviously, if you're looking to be promoted or want to learn more about how to get to that point, and for your team. I mean, these are our listeners, are folks in roles who are leading career development at their organizations, coaching managers as they're having these conversations. So I encourage all of you to check this out. Amii, where can they learn more about the index?
Yeah, they can get the promotability assessment on my website, barnard-bahn.com. I also have a newsletter and many other resources on my YouTube. I have videos around how to use the promotability index. I have a newsletter, and then I'm happy for everyone to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Thank you. So finally, in our conversation today, I'd like to kind of focus on what's next in career development. We often talk about that on this podcast, for future trends, what are the big ideas and issues that folks in different areas are talking about, seeing, imagining, predicting, whatever you might say.
Yeah.
Personally, I've heard a lot lately about lateral career moves, and you certainly mentioned that, Amii, as well. That development isn't, or shouldn't, to use that word again, be all about climbing a ladder or upward mobility, and that many employees, especially today, perhaps more than 10 years or so ago, care less about that traditional promotion track, the upward track. What are you seeing as far as the career development function goes, trends, some things that you think this audience should keep their eyes on?
Yeah, it's such an amazing audience you have here. Love the work that you all are doing to keep people growing and moving. And I think lateral moves are a great example of that. We're living longer. I think careers are not linear. And so having that support that talent development provides is really important in terms of helping people to see that it's not always up or out, that lateral moves are a really great way to deepen experience and demonstrate agility and breadth and to keep learning. I think that as people, we're all meant to grow, and there's only so much room at the top. So it's just unrealistic to always keep looking up. We need, the majority of people, we need solidly, at every step in the way, and for them to be growing and happy and fulfilled in their career. And so sometimes people want to do a deep vertical. They don't want to manage people either ever, or they may manage for a while and then decide, I actually just want to just be great at what I do and be a specialist. So those are all fantastic things. I mean, some people just don't want the pressure of being a CEO or being on the leadership team. So I think depending on your goals and where you are, lateral moves are fantastic. I quit my law firm 3 years into it, not knowing what I wanted to do. It was one of the scariest moves and smartest moves I've ever made in my life. I quit just realizing I was out of line with my values. I didn't like the billable hour requirement. It just making clients happy wasn't the direct goal. And I realized I really wanted to solve problems before they made it to litigation. And that's when I took a year of travel and some soul searching and some coaching myself and found HR. And it was a fantastic values match. I realized I liked the advice and counsel of being an HR business partner and getting in there before little issues became really big issues. But I took a huge pay cut, and it was, a huge, technically a status cut too, which couldn't have happened at a better time because I didn't get I realized, wow, being a lawyer is kind of a thing. And I didn't realize how much we've been pumped up with that in terms of our identity. And so I was able to pretty early separate my identity from my profession, which is a tall order, I think, the older you get. And so, I don't know, having that early experience and then working in HR for 11 years and then moving into different organizations, moving into corporate HR, ultimately then going up to ethics and compliance, then to a general counsel, and then back to CHRO. I couldn't have done all those things, Anne, if I hadn't taken some risks along the way. And so I'm a huge proponent of following in a wise way, following your instincts around where your curiosity is leading you and continuing to learn and gain depth in different areas. People now think, they look back at my career, they're like, oh, you have such an amazing career. And I laugh. I'm grateful that in the rearview mirror, it looks good, but I could have never designed this intentionally if I tried. It was actually very hard to get that first HR job too. I really had to pound pavement, to get it. But I just love it now because it all comes together. You find these adjacent areas and you put it together in your own special way. And that creates a value proposition that is really, you can't compete with it when it's your own creation. So I highly recommend people going out there and following their passions. And we're just, humans are incredible in their ability to learn and pivot off of new things. And I think you'd just be surprised at what you can do with lateral experiences.
I love the idea of using your instincts and curiosity. I think that serves, my life. That served me well. Parenting,
yes,
relationships, right? Just kind of knowing yourself, as you've said, the self-awareness piece, and knowing your goals and your values, and then making sure everything aligns to that.
Yeah, and as we live longer, again, I think for talent development professionals, just there's so many more paths that are going to be available to us now, and some jobs that we can't even imagine that haven't been created yet with the onset of AI. It's exciting. I choose to be an optimist. So there's a lot of fears around AI, but there's also going to be some real exciting opportunities. And another thing I'll mention is I've been watching the trend around age discrimination. As we live longer and as we work longer, I know a lot of people don't like to think about this, but it's starting to show up with a lot of my colleagues. Right around your 50s, I would say it starts to show up. And I hope that changes. I hope that as we live longer and as there is a shortage of talent, the first place to go for a shortage of talent is your 50s, because you've got people who have worked a long time and who are fantastic at it, and we're all living longer. We are healthier now than our parents ever were, right? We have access to things they never had. So we've got probably a good 10, 20 years if we want to, and if our health continues, to keep working. And so these lateral moves are going to people are going to need to be more creative in their careers, because unfortunately, some large corporations are not going to allow the opportunities. Again, I hope that changes, but it may, culture lags behind ability, usually, is what I find in general. And we have a greater capacity. So for us individually, it's important to be thinking about that as well, because we may need to be creative and be entrepreneurs in our own rights, or consultants, that kind of thing. And so building that network before you need it, keeping an open mind, not being afraid. Don't ever let fear keep you back. Just remember all the great stuff you've already done. If you are stuck in a place like that, have positive voices around you. And I think you can keep going with it. But I think that's going to be very important, because I think we're going to be seeing more and more agility and portfolio building in careers as we move into this greater capacity during life.
Amii, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an awesome conversation. I've learned a lot. I know our listeners have as well. Before we go, please tell listeners, you mentioned your website, your LinkedIn, any other places they should visit, your writing, any other you might recommend.
Thank you. I think your group might really enjoy a lot of the articles I've written in Harvard Business Review. So if you just, luckily my name is spelled funky. It's Amii. So if you just type in Google Amii and HBR, you're likely to come up with a bunch of articles that I've written, about a dozen over the past few years. And there's a lot on team relationships, on promotions, on pay equality. That's another area I've written a lot about. That's adjacent probably to a lot of talent development. So that's another thing. And then I also have a LinkedIn newsletter, and I also have then a private newsletter, and they have different content. And I put everything, my podcasts, my articles, other resources and free tools on my website under resources. I've got about, I think I've got hundreds at this point, and a lot on delivering bad news. Actually, I don't know if your colleagues are in the space where they need to deliver bad news a lot, but a lot of CHROs and HRBPs are. So I did some pretty deep social science research into that and created a 6-step process for how to deliver bad news without suffering political blowback, which I think is really important. I support a lot of truth tellers in organizations because workplace culture is very important to me. Being a lawyer, being an ethics executive, and being an HR person, I want to equip good leaders to have the tough conversations, because it can't all be rainbows and unicorns, right? We want to be able to have the tough discussions in an honorable, graceful way. So those are other things that are important, I think, to enable.
I think we're going to need a part 2 podcast with you on culture. That's a big one. Near and dear to the hearts of our audience. So yes, I hear you on that.
That'd be great. Yeah, culture is so important. I write a lot about that. So thank you to everyone who's out there leading and supporting that. It's never been more critical.
Well, thank you again, Amii. Appreciate your time today and your wisdom, your experience, your insights, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me, Anne.
Thank you for listening to this podcast by the Association for Talent Development. If you found this show insightful or useful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague.